Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope everyone's doing well. Christmas season is here, and pretty soon we're going to be celebrating both Christmas and New Year's, and we'll be rolling into 2023. Hopefully we'll have a better time of it in 2023 than we've had the past couple of years. Now, in this episode I want to talk about Calvin and Hobbes. I've been reading through the complete collection. I'm in book 4, but it's usually I would wait till the end to review a book. However, I have read all of the Calvin and Hobbes comics that have ever been printed from 1985 to 1995. So I very much enjoy Calvin and Hobbes, and have since I first saw it in the funnies in the comics pages way back in 1985. There's kind of a interesting backstory to Calvin and Hobbes. Apparently Bill Watterson, the comic book artist here, I shouldn't say comic book artist, I should say comic artist. The artist here, what he did was he was working as an advertising artist, and he hated his job. So he started drawing comics to sell to syndication. And what he did was he drew a comic, and the syndication that he submitted it to, they took one look at it and said, you know, we don't really like everything else here, but we do like this little boy and this and his stuffed tiger. Maybe you should focus on that and make that into your comic. So he did, and we got Calvin and Hobbes. The funny thing is that the syndicate that he originally submitted that idea to, and then came back and said focus on the boy and the tiger, they ultimately rejected that comic strip that he built from their suggestion, and he ended up selling it to another syndicate, and from there he had 10 years of writing Calvin and Hobbes. So there's two versions of the complete Calvin and Hobbes. There's a hardback version and there's this paperback version. The paperback version has 4 books, and I'm pretty sure that the reason they have 4 books in the paperback version is because the bindings are less, they're just not as strong as the hardback version. And so it makes it so that it's more sturdy, if you will. Anyway, as I said, I've loved Calvin and Hobbes since I first started reading it back in 1985. I really wish that Bill Watterson had not retired from drawing Calvin and Hobbes, because I loved it so much. I wish he'd kept on doing it. However, I understand that doing Calvin and Hobbes and the lengths that he went through to get what he wanted and what he needed in order to express his artistic vision and to express his sense of humor, took quite a toll on him. It's interesting to read up on some of the things that happened around Calvin and Hobbes, and some of the lengths that Bill Watterson went to preserve Calvin and Hobbes as they are. And because of that, I completely understand that he had to step away from it. But in a lot of ways, I wish that, like the Peanuts, he'd been doing it. He was still around doing Calvin and Hobbes. And I would love to meet Bill Watterson. I understand that he's a very private person and everything, and so I will not be trying to go out of my way to run into him, but I would love to meet Bill Watterson. If nothing else, to just shake his hand and say thank you. I really, really love Calvin Hobbes. Anyway, Calvin and Hobbes is about a little boy and his stuffed tiger. Calvin is a 6-year-old, and one of the really brilliant things about this comic is that Calvin is named after... I know who he's named after. He's named after John Calvin. I just wanted to... 16th century theologian, John Calvin. I wanted to get the year, the century correct. I didn't want to just say, oh, he's, old. But so he was named after John Calvin, and his stuffed tiger Hobbes, is named after Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century philosopher. So already in the Calvin and Hobbes mythos, if you will, or I shouldn't say mythos is the wrong word to use here, but in Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson has already set up this dynamic between Calvin and his stuffed tiger that allows them to talk about philosophy, art, and things that you don't normally associate with a comic, with something that you would find as a comic in the newspaper. And so quite often some of the humor that you find in Calvin and Hobbes comes from this dynamic of the two of them talking about actually heavy philosophical topics. So it's quite interesting that they have this back and forth that they can go through. I can't say that I know whether or not Calvin and Hobbes actually strictly follow the views and the ideals expressed by the people they were named after, but there were a number of comics where Calvin is despairing of humanity and Hobbes is basically saying, that's why I enjoy being a tiger, kind of thing. And just that that innocence that is there with Calvin in expressing something, and Hobbes is like, yep, that's why I'm a tiger. It's just great. It's just, and I have there was no pun intended there, and I'm not trying to sound like Tony the Tiger, but it just came out. There are several side characters, obviously, with the comic centering around Calvin and his tiger. There's his parents, never named. It's just mom and dad. He has a neighbor, Susie Durkins, who he is often at odds with. Susie is a girl, and Calvin is at the age where girls are gross, and that actually gross is something that comes out in the book. It's Calvin's club. He establishes a club called Gross, which stands for Get Rid of Slimy Girls. And Calvin is the dictator for life, and Hobbes is the president and first tiger. Now, another dynamic of the comic is that Calvin sees Hobbes as you can see here, Hobbes is a much larger anthropomorphic tiger, and this is the way that Calvin sees him. Everyone else in the series sees Hobbes as nothing more than a stuffed tiger. And one of the things that I very much enjoy is that Bill Watterson never nails down Hobbes's true nature. He never solidifies it as, this is Hobbes, this is what he is, and this is just Calvin's imagination. Hobbes is somewhat magical, and he can be both to Hobbes and to the rest of the world. He can be both to Calvin, a anthropomorphic tiger, and to the rest of the world, just Calvin's toy. So he plays on this dual nature of Hobbes in the comics, and some of the best comics that he has drawn are the ones where Hobbes, being true to his tigerish nature, pounces on Calvin, and then the onlooker finds Calvin slumped on the floor with this stuffed tiger just draped across him, and he's all both of them are all scuffed and beat up because of the exuberant nature of Hobbes's greeting. I highly recommend Calvin and Hobbes. I can't say enough about it. One of the formative memories of my childhood is sitting down and grabbing the newspaper and reading Calvin and Hobbes. So that's it for today. Please, as always, like and subscribe. Comment down below. If there are memories that you have of Calvin and Hobbes and Bill Watterson, please let me know. Also, if there are other comics that have caught your attention, Peanuts is always a good one. I remember reading Peanuts. My dad had several of the Peanuts comics that he collected over the years and things. But I did want to mention one other thing. Part of the difficulty that Bill Watterson had with the Calvin and Hobbes comic was because of his reluctance to commercialize Calvin and Hobbes. There are very, very, very few actual licensed commercial items that you can get of Calvin and Hobbes. The books, obviously, are one of the options you can get, but you won't find Calvin and Hobbes plushes. You won't find Calvin and Hobbes t-shirts. There's nothing out there for Calvin and Hobbes, and Bill Watterson has tried very, very hard over the years, and this is one of the reasons why I feel that he had such a hard time, and he ended up retiring from the strip, is this battle to keep Calvin and Hobbes from being commercialized. It was part of his philosophy of Calvin and Hobbes that he felt that they needed to remain uncommercialized and be able to stand on their own. There are actually a few things that have been officially licensed. There are some prints that you can get, but apparently there was a t-shirt that they made, but it was for the Smithsonian for an event there. There's actually a textbook that has Calvin and Hobbes in it, and it's one of the hardest Calvin and Hobbes collectibles to find. There's also some stamps that were issued by the United States Postal Service that have Calvin and Hobbes on them, but that's about it. All of those stickers you see of Calvin peeing on some logo, those are all copyright. They're all infringements of Bill Watterson's copyright. And it will be interesting to see what happens to Calvin and Hobbes after Bill Watterson passes away. I wonder if it will be somewhat like what's happened to the Tolkien estate, where there's opportunities for studios to come in and buy up the copyright or license the copyright, and what we might see after that. Not that I wish any harm to befall Bill Watterson. I'm just wondering what might happen in the future with that, seeing as how he does not want to have Calvin and Hobbes commercialized in any way at this point in time. Anyway, that's it for today. Like and subscribe, and enjoy what you're reading.